Are you ready? The engines sound like they're ready to go. Are you all set?
Welcome back, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of barSILENCE. My name is Jameson, and I'm your host. Every episode of this show aims to explore the very best video game music from past and present. If you're new to the show, you can head over to barsilence.com where you can listen to past episodes, see track listings, as well as being able to click an easy link to subscribe on whatever your favorite podcatcher is. You can also listen on 8beats Radio, where the show plays live on the first Tuesday of every month. Check it out at 8beats.co, or check out the show notes for a link to 8beats and all of the excellent DJ mixes and other video game music shows on the site. This month, we're going to be listening to the absolutely iconic soundtracks from the first few entries in the Ridge Racer series of games. As if you couldn't already tell from the enthusiastic announcer from the main theme that opened today's show. Now, I've mentioned on the show before that I love Ridge Racer, and I truly do. And my love for this game stems from my experience as just a young Jameson playing Ridge Racer in the arcades. First, I should say that I grew up around muscle cars and drag racing. I went to countless car shows as a kid, so racing has always been part of my core. In those blissful early days of summer when I wasn't at a car show, I used to ride my bike up to the local arcade called Aladdin's Castle. There, you'd find older kids lined up with their quarters in hand, playing fighting games like Tekken, Killer Instinct, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, and shooting games like Area 51 and Time Crisis. And while I liked those games too, I had my own fistful of quarters and I was eager to play just about anything without a wait. This is when I found my first Ridge Racer arcade machine. This streamlined single-seater contraption was bright red, and it had a cool wavy yellow racing stripe down the side. And it also had a full-size sports car-shaped seat with a real steering wheel and a gear shifter. So while I didn't even really know how to drive at the time, this game spoke to me in a way I knew I had to play it. Ridge Racer is not your typical racing game either. It was all about shaving fractions of a second from your lap times, and it was difficult to master. And admittedly, I wasn't very good the first time I played. Eventually, I had made friends with one of the older kids who ended up helping me figure out how to take corners and learn the almighty skill set of drifting. As it turned out, this kid who was teaching me was already a legend in the arcade and had been setting the best times on this machine for months. So from that moment forward, it ended up being our lap times that stayed on that machine throughout the entire summer. Anyone who's actually had the honor of playing Ridge Racer in the arcade knows that the soundtrack was critical in making the experience unmatchable. The intense racing in the game was paired with pulse-pounding early 90s techno music that was generations ahead of your typical arcade soundtrack. The music was crafted first and foremost to amplify the exciting high-speed racing and then push the pedal to the metal with hard rhythms to keep you in the zone. So let's get into our first block of music. Underneath us now is Ridge Racer in the Jazz Groove, which is a remix of Winning Turn from the extremely rare Laserdisc playthrough titled Ridge Laser. First, we're going to start things off with Ridge Racer in its original format by master of EGM Shinji Hosoe, and then we're going to follow it with the truly iconic track called Rare Hero by Nobuyoshi Sano. Then, for the last track in this block, we're going to hear Speedster, also by Shinji Hosoe. And interestingly, in the last episode about Jet Set Radio, I ended the show with the selection Oldies But Happies, where I mentioned it would likely be the only time you hear the voice of Richard Nixon on the show. And, well, apparently that was a lie. This song actually prominently features a voice sample of part of Richard Nixon's phone call with the Apollo 11 astronauts after they landed on the moon. Pretty cool, right? Anyhow, enjoy these tracks and I'll be back afterwards to talk a little bit more about Ridge Racer and its release on the PlayStation 1. Ridge Racer was first released in 1993 in arcades on the Namco System 22 arcade board, which powered other Namco releases like Ace Driver, Alpine Racer, Air Combat, Time Crisis, and many more between 1992 and 1996. The game was originally planned to be a Formula 1 game similar to Pole Position and Final Lap, but instead, it features drift racing as its key gameplay mechanic. This unique addition to the game was based on Japanese drift racers who would fly through mountain roads without slowing down for turns. If you've seen Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, you know exactly what I'm talking about. In order to stay ahead of the checkpoints along the course, you had to have full control over every turn, and if you failed to keep up with those unforgiving quarter-munching checkpoints, your time ran out and your game was over. Ridge Racer was considered revolutionary when it came out in 1993 for its graphics and gameplay style. And it also had stiff competition too. Sega released the iconic Daytona USA just a few months later. Both of these games featured fully 3D texture map polygonal worlds and cars. But there was something about Ridge Racer that felt tighter, more responsive in the controls, and had this conceptual freedom taking you away from a racetrack and instead gave you a fictional world to race in. Ridge Racer excelled because it felt alive. Throughout the course, you see billboards that refer to other Namco games, gas stations that you race past, helicopters and planes fly overhead, and they all work together to create this immersive fictional world that's often referred to as Ridge City. In each race, you start in last place, and as you pass the starting line, the course places you in a city-like environment. Once you take that first turn through the underground tunnel, you arrive at a highly detailed suspension bridge, and then scream through another major turn, down through a beautiful coastal area filled with palm trees. You take another hard right through the mountains, and finally come out to this small town before drifting through the final corner right back to the starting line. It was an experience to say the least. So when the home version of the game was released for the Sony PlayStation in 1995 in North America and Europe, Sony used this game as a launch title to prove its new machine could do the unthinkable: deliver an arcade-perfect port. Development of the PlayStation version started in April of 1994, and somehow, by December of that same year, just 8 months after having to rebuild the game entirely from the ground up, they delivered that previously unthinkable feat. They released a near-perfect arcade port that ran at a crisp 30 frames per second that maintained that sensation of speed that the arcade machine was known for. Sony was making a statement to gamers. 3D games and the arcades were coming home via the incredible power of the PlayStation. When paired with the high-fidelity CD quality sound of the incredible soundtrack, it was a must-have for launch-era titles. The music of the game was produced alongside the arcade's original development by Shinji Hosoe, with contributions from Nobuyoshi Sano and Ayako Saso. Originally, the game wasn't even going to have music, but this team's love of techno, hardcore, and gabber techno ended up becoming the groundbreaking soundtrack that paired perfectly with the energy, speed, and high tension of the game's racing. So for this next block, we're going to listen to Feeling Over by Ayako Saso and finish it with the timeless classic and my absolute favorite song from the game, Rhythm Shift. So enjoy these tracks, and I'll be back afterwards to talk about Ridge Racer 2 and the PlayStation sequel, Ridge Racer Revolution. Ridge Racer 2 was released in July of 1994, just 9 months after the first game landed in arcades in Japan. Despite getting a numeral designation as a sequel, it featured the exact same cars, tracks, and graphics. This sequel did include a rear-view mirror option though, which was helpful because this time the game allowed for 4 two-player cabinets to link together, giving up to 8 players the ability to race one another. Next Generation Magazine reviewed the arcade cabinet, giving it 4 out of 5 stars, noting that this enabled Ridge Racer 2 to compete on equal footing with Sega's Daytona USA. Now, Ridge Racer 2 was not translated to home consoles, likely because it really wasn't truly different enough when played at home to be considered a follow-up. What was new this time though was the soundtrack. This game featured many all-new tracks of that incredible thumping and pulse-pounding music that the original was known for. And this exact same soundtrack was used on the sequel, Ridge Racer Revolution, for the PlayStation 1. But before we get into the sequel that did come out, let's listen to a few of these new songs that were composed for the release of Ridge Racer 2. First up is the game's intro track called Welcome RR. It's definitely similar to the song that started this show, but this version ramps the energy up to 11. Then, we'll follow it with a sensational song called Lords of Techno by Ayako Saso, with its high energy lead and deep bass breakouts. Last, we'll hear Drive You to Dancing with all of its frantic bounce, voice samples, and adrenaline-charged beats. So let's get into this one, and I'll be back afterwards to talk more about the true sequel that was released on the PlayStation 1, Ridge Racer Revolution.
Ridge Racer 2! We're ready and waiting for you! Come on! Pull up to the starting line and rev your engine! Ridge
final game for this episode is Ridge Racer Revolution. This PlayStation exclusive game was released first in Japan in December of 1995, and it reached North America and Europe later in 1996. So while the arcade sequel was nearly the same game, this release was more of a true sequel and another step forward for the series, albeit a small one. The gameplay itself remains unchanged with its drifting mechanics, checkpoint system, and features the same cars and overall stylings of the original. But this time it played out on 3 brand new tracks that all share different sections that overlap with each other, giving it an expanded feeling of existing in the same location. And while Ridge Racer was absolutely the best racing experience one could have when the PlayStation first came out, by this time in 1996, games like Tekken 2, Wipeout XL, and Twisted Metal were giving everyone a taste of what the PlayStation could do, and games like Gran Turismo were just around the corner. But for Ridge Racer fans, this was still a good experience. This game gave players the ability to link 2 systems together for head-to-head play similar to how the arcade release of Ridge Racer 2 did. It also rewarded players for mastering the Galaga 88 loading screen minigame by unlocking 8 additional car options, and gave advanced players the challenge to unlock the Devil Car, Devil Kid Car, and White Angel cars by beating them in the time trial mode. Now, the soundtrack for this game is basically the same as Ridge Racer 2 in the arcade, but for many PlayStation gamers, this was their first time hearing these energetic tracks. So let's round this final corner and listen to my favorite track from both of these soundtracks called Grip by Nobuyoshi Sano. This song is different than anything else you've heard in the soundtracks for these games so far. It's not ravey, and it's not gabber hardcore. This one should, for Ridge Racer fans, feel very similar to the soundtracks you hear in future releases of Ridge Racer games. In particular, it sounds a little bit like Ridge Racer 5 on the PlayStation 2 and Ridge Racer 6 on the Xbox 360. Clocking in at just over 8 minutes, this long and soaring track remains popular for fans of the Ridge Racer series and is easily one of the best from these early Ridge Racer games. So enjoy this track, and I'll be back after that. And that's the show. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this episode of barSILENCE about the original era of the Ridge Racer games released for the arcade and PlayStation 1. If you want to interact with the show and tell me what you think about my selections in this episode, you can follow me on a variety of social media platforms. I'm still on Twitter, at barSILENCEVGM. You can also check out the show notes and find links to follow the show on Tumblr and Instagram. That's where I'll be posting various information about the games that are featured in this episode. And, same as always, please consider taking a moment to leave a rating review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find the show because I'd really love to hear what you think. And don't forget, you can go to barSILENCE.com to listen to past shows if you miss any. And of course, if you're feeling giving, you can always support barSILENCE on Patreon. Check the show notes to find an easy link to contribute. And, for already being Patreon subscribers of the show, I want to thank listeners Zoe and Alusa. You both are truly excellent, and I cannot thank you enough for helping me keep the show going each month. You are both the best, and I very much appreciate you. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. I also want to thank friend of the show and fellow VGM podcaster, Professor Tom, from the Shujin Academy VGM Club as well. I've had the honor of working with Professor Tom making graphics for his incredible show over the last year. His thoughtful and interestingly themed episodes are a delightful educational listen. You can and should check out his podcast, so head to the show notes and you'll find a link to tune in there. And of course last, I'd like to thank the show's sponsor, Bold Pick and Specialty Pickles. This independently owned flavor-forward pickle company was started in 2017, and these are legit the best pickles I've ever had in my life, so you should absolutely try them. Check them out at boldpickens.com and see if you can find them in stores near you. So, to end the show, I've got a final track to play us out. We're going to listen to the smooth and grooving beats of Winning Turn that comes from the arcade release of Ridge Racer 2 by Shinji Hosoe. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.
Ridge Racer!